So I want to share a testimony of how our son Gio almost died or should have died last year, but because of God's grace and his faithfulness, he kept him for us to grow in our faith, and just for somebody else out there today to know and believe that God is able to deliver you out of any situation that you are in right now, where you think that God is not near, you can't feel him, you can't see him, you can't see his handprint in anything that is happening with you. Just know and be encouraged that God is with you and he's faithful to deliver you out of what is happening with you now. Last year this time Gio would have been released from the hospital. So a few weeks before, he complained of a tummy ache in the night, late in the night, and I gave him some tea, put him to bed, and the next morning he woke up and he still complained of a tummy ache and he was vomiting a little. So the vomit wasn't anything dramatic, to say, oh, he needs to go to the hospital. And so I was watching him, saying, I'll watch him. And the vomit got worse in the day, and so we decided to take him to the hospital. When we took him to the hospital, they started running some tests,
Well, sorry, I should correct it. No, we didn't take him to the hospital. We took him to the pediatrician first.
Right, we took him to the pediatrician.
And the pediatrician, when we told her about the vomiting, she checked him and he was dehydrated. So the automatic assumption was that he probably had gastroenteritis.
Right.
So she started right away to give him the oral rehydration salt, but she also told us to go straight to the hospital now. So we took him to the hospital, and we were there for a long while, and they checked him and they tried to get him to take he wasn't taking the rehydration salt and we were giving it to him, and he wasn't keeping it down. So at the hospital they had us trying to give it to him. They tried to give it to him intravenously through the IV, and he was there, and after a while with that they tried to give him orally, and it just was not going down.
Or staying down.
Yeah, it wasn't staying down. And I don't remember if he had a fever. I don't think he had a fever.
He had a fever.
He had a fever? Okay, he had a fever. But something just wasn't working, and they decided to admit him. He didn't have, they assumed that he had gastroenteritis, and the symptoms seemed that way. So he was admitted to it's an isolation ward at the Children's Hospital, and he was there. And he was there, almost a week. He was there, and he just wasn't getting better.
Wasn't eating, still vomiting.
Right.
Having diarrhea. The diarrhea started.
Right. They tried him on tried him on clear fluids like apple juice and so on, and it just was not working. And some of the doctors got concerned. In fact, one doctor, she had I think he had stopped passing stool. He had stopped passing stool.
And the tummy started swelling.
And his tummy started to get really, really distended. And the doctors were concerned, and they did X-ray upon X-ray upon X-ray, trying to figure out what was going on, to see if there was some kind of mechanical obstruction in his intestines or something, to see what was causing his tummy to get distended, or was causing him to not pass stool. And the doctors were very concerned. So after about a week, or almost a week, they got the consultant to look at the matter, and they went down to do an ultrasound.
Right.
When they went to do the ultrasound, the consultant saw fluid around his appendix.
Right.
Right? And when I say his tummy got distended, I mean it got distended until the veins in his tummy were showing. The blood vessels were showing. And so when the doctor saw what was happening, the fluid around his tummy, he said that this looks like appendicitis. Mark you, they said that the presentation was atypical. They would not have assumed that it was appendicitis. And he was he was not yet 2 years old. He was almost 2 years old.
It was a week before his birthday, the 27th.
So he was almost 2 years old. And, it's not common to see appendicitis in children that age.
But also, too, one of the things he said to us was that the fluid, they're not certain as to where it is coming from, but
Or
even
what it
if,
is.
or what it is, but even if they're not sure, they would prefer to go in
And see
to
what's
see
happening.
what it is than they don't go in and then something happens to him. So he spoke to us outside. And he said to us that, you know, they are going to have to prep him for surgery and we're going to have to sign a lot of documents. And they went through the process with us. And for us, in that moment, we said that we needed to pray and we needed to call on others to pray with us, you know, to help us to find out what is God's, you know, wisdom in all of this. Does he need surgery? He's not even two, you know, and, you know, naturally, I kind of started to panic a little because I'm saying he's just a baby kind of thing, and, you know, you're going to cut into his tummy, and, you know, that just, you know, creepy. So we started praying about it, and, you know, we needed to make a decision about it, you know, and the whole talk of blood transfusion, and if, you know, he needs blood and all of that. And, you know, we prayed about it, and we, after a while, we knew that the Lord would have him do this surgery. So that Thursday night, he went into surgery about 11.
Right. Well, if I can just say before we go any further. So we were very nervous. It's our child, almost two, who had to do surgery. And and the doctor explained that, you know, they may have to remove the appendix based on what's happening. But on the night of surgery, we were in the lobby for the operating theater, and we were introduced to the team that was going to be in the surgery, and we asked them to pray with us. And you know, did we hold hands? I don't remember.
Yeah,
we held hands, and we prayed that Lord would guide their hands and that we would have a successful surgery. And so they went in at about 11 p.m. The night. It was April 25th to be exact. And their birthday, he's a part of a twin. Their birthday was supposed to be on the 27th of April. So 2 days before his birthday, he had surgery. Okay?
Right. So, you know, they went in at about 11 and we sat outside because naturally you're not going to want to go anywhere because your child is in surgery. So we sat out there for a while and I was crying naturally because I was just very nervous, and it's not that I never had faith. It's not that I never believed that God would carry me through. It's very hard to just, because in my head I'm saying he's afraid, you know, but I had to know that I have to trust God, that God would be with them, God would be with him, even though he's so tiny, God would be with him on that bed, you know. And they went in and we sat outside for a while, and I think we probably just fell asleep or, you know, dozed off a little because we were so tired, because would have been there a whole week, you know, not much sleep because you're up and down because your baby's in the hospital. And so, you know, we felt somebody just kind of gave us a little gentle tap on the shoulder and say, "Mommy, Daddy." So when we opened our eyes, it was a surgeon. And I wish I had a bottle now. And he said to us that, you know, the surgery was successful. And he told us of, you know, the little things that we would have to look for now to say, just in case, you know, something happens. And, you know, how we would treat with him, and that he has to be placed in the intensive care unit. And he shared with us, he said he was doing, you know, in terms of being in the field of medicine, he was doing it for over 30 years. And in all his 30 odd years, he had never seen anything like what he witnessed in the surgery room a while ago, where they took out more than the Pepsi bottle. What's it called this measurement again?
I don't know, about
the regular size
500
Pepsi bottle, right?
almost 600 milliliters.
Right.
Yes.
They took out that amount of pus, you know, liquid out of the baby's, you know,
abdomen. So
abdomen.
The liquid that was surrounding the appendix was pus. So what had happened was that the appendix had gone bad and had ruptured and was leaking pus into the abdomen, and pus, the intestines were bathing in pus, and that is why the intestines had stopped working, and that's why he wasn't passing any stool. The intestine, so it's what do you call it, sepsis. The infection was swimming around in his body. And when he came out of surgery, he wasn't breathing on his own.
Two parts of the lung collapsed.
Right, the lower part of his lungs had collapsed. I think because of the distension in his stomach. So in the abdomen rather. So the lower part of the lungs had collapsed. Not collapsed or stopped working. I don't remember what it was. So that was one issue. Then of course the intestinal issues and so on.
And the infection, because they were saying that they got out as much as they could, but now he would have to be treated for it, so that there's no further, I don't remember the word that they use, but there's no, it doesn't go any further, because what it can travel and damage the other organs that were inside the
that's
body.
sepsis. That's sepsis.
Right, that's a sepsis.
So the doctor, surgeon had explained that the next couple of days would be really crucial. He'd be in the ICU, and in the ICU we have to be very, very careful about we have to be very sterile going inside and so on. And believe me, when they took him out and they brought him to the ICU, our baby looked dead.
Yeah.
Our baby looked like, his face was swollen. He was so swollen, his eyes couldn't open. Well, he was asleep, but his eyes were swollen shut. And even when he eventually woke up, he could hardly open his eyes. But God has been good. God was good. Just a couple of days after being in the ICU, he started, less than 24 hours being in the ICU, he started breathing on his own. So he started breathing on his own, and I don't remember how many days he stayed there, but he eventually
stayed there about 4 days. 4 days.
He eventually left the ICU and went onto the ward. Right.
So on the regular ward now, because he couldn't necessarily take a lot of visitors because he was very fragile, but a few persons, they came by, and persons were praying. All of this taking place, we had people just praying and just going on behalf of Gio, to God. And when I went now on Thursday, because I went to work and I came back, and when I came from work, to look at him, I saw that his bandage had a little spot on it, and then I saw that it's blood. So I said, probably the wound is seeping just a little, probably when they were changing the bandage or whatever. So I saw that the spot, it was getting bigger and bigger. So I'm saying, but this looks as if it's seeping, and I called a few nurses' attention to it. But naturally, they're nurses, they're busy, it's a lot going on, there are limited nurses, but so many children. So I was using grace to give them some time. And then when I saw that it was getting really bad, I started calling for them, to come to look at it urgently, because I'm saying, why is it bleeding? And everybody was busy because his shift changeover, handover, all of that. And so I saw one of his doctors passing, and I know that even though he's busy, he'll probably stop by, because they'll stop to check in on him. And he stopped by, and I shared with him my concern that I saw the bandage leaking and that kind of thing. So he said, okay, he's going to take a look. And so I think he probably just forgot that I was standing there. So he pulled one end of the bandage, and when he pulled the end of the bandage, I literally looked, and I could see inside the baby's stomach. The abdomen. The cut was opening up, just like that. Whew. So naturally I panicked. I just ran out of the room, went to call my husband, and I was just bawling down the place. Like, I was traumatized, because I'm saying, this is not even a week ago.
So when I went and looked at it, what you're seeing was not in the abdomen, because they stitched the abdominal wall, and then they stitched the outer, the skin. And what you were seeing, so the sutures on the skin had ruptured, they pulled out. So you could actually see the flesh going down to the stitches in the abdominal wall. And the doctor explained that he wasn't healing well. The wound just was not healthy. I don't know what would cause that. And that they would have to go back to the operating theater to address it. And they would have to go back to the operating theater to drain the I guess, see if there's any more infection in the stomach, in the abdominal cavity. Clean it out, wash out inside, and stitch it up again. So the second week, and this is exactly 1 week after. So he went in one Thursday, went to the operating theater the other Thursday, and he's going back to the operating theater again the next Thursday. So I don't know what was happening on with Thursdays. But we trusted the Lord, and we really prayed. And he went in, and the surgery was successful. Thank God he didn't have to go back on the ICU, and he was able to return to the ward. Now, all this time, this is about 3 weeks now, all this time our son is not eating. And even when he returned to the ward, he was, they have to start with the intravenous fluids, and they try on clear fluids, and then they try on light color, well, let's say cleared fluids, and then they try with some kind of food. And he was starving.
Oh, God.
He was starving. If he would see anybody at all with food around him, he would go crazy. He was starving. He had not eaten for weeks. And I mean, the other thing I have to tell you is that in all this time, and I don't remember if it was after the first surgery or the second surgery, but all this time, our son has not smiled. He did not smile at the hospital at all. And because it's a children's hospital, you're not really allowed to bring other children on the ward and so on. But we took a risk, and we brought our other son, that's the other twin, George, with us one day, and we were able to let him see his brother through the window because he couldn't go on the ward. And when he saw his brother through the window and they were calling to each other, it was the very first time that he smiled. It was the first time he smiled in weeks. And the surgeon who was there, Dr. McLennan, he was there and he saw the interaction. And he said, "Oh, this is what G has been wanting all this time," And the nurses were saying, no, he can't be playing with him and so on, to the window. And Dr. McKenna was saying, just take it easy. Just let him see his brother.
That's who he's connected to.
Let him see his brother. So he saw his brother, and he really smiled and laughed. Yeah, perked up. And I don't remember what happened, but the nurses allowed him to eat one day. The nurses allowed him to. I think he had started passing not a lot of stool, but some kind of spotting or something. And the nurses, they allowed him to eat one day. I don't remember what they allowed him to eat. I think rice and some other stuff. And because of that, he got ill again. And he completely stopped passing stool. No kind of spotting, nothing at all. And he had to return to just drinking clear fluids. Eventually, he started passing stool, and he was able to go back on get food. He was able to get his meals, and so on. I tell you, our son was skinny. I remember one day we were able to take him outside of the ward, and I was there with both him and his brother. And when you think of when you look at my Geo, the image that comes to mind is some of the infomercials that we see from Save the Children about donating funds to Save the Children or whichever other NGO about donating funds to feed children who are starving in Africa or Asia. That's the kind of image that comes to your mind when you see when you look at Geo. But God has been good, and He has come through. I think at one point we were just faced with the fact that Gio could possibly die.
Yeah.
And I think that we had prayed, maybe Erica more than I, just prayed and said, Lord, if you're taking him, whatever your will is, you can have him, but we're going to fight for him to live.
Yeah.
And we really stormed heaven.
And I mean, even the doctor said it. He said that this should be a dead baby because not even an adult should have this much pus inside of them, and this should be a dead baby. So,
yeah. But we are a year on, and Gio has his scar, and if you ask me to show you his scar, he'll show you his scar. But he's running up and down, doing everything normal, fine. I mean, it's a real testimony. God really came through, because there are many persons who have died because of appendicitis.
Many babies who went in before him and after him who just...
You mean the ones who didn't make it? But not necessarily for appendicitis. I mean, they came in for various reasons and just never left. But even adults have died because of ruptured appendix, because of a ruptured appendix. But Gio, we don't know how long he had it, but I mean, he was ill for at least a week at that hospital before they figured out what was happening. Because the same day they figured out what was happening is the same day they did the surgery, that later that night. So he was there for at least a week with a problem with his appendix. We don't know when it ruptured, but it had ruptured long enough for so much pus to have been created and to have seeped out into his abdominal cavity. Well, I don't know if that's what I call it, a cavity, but into his abdomen where his intestines and so on were there. But as I said, God has been faithful to us, and he was at death's door, but thanks to God, he's a living testimony of how good God is, and how prayer really works wonders. Yeah.
And I don't think God saved him because of our faith or because of how much we have faith that God would save him, and but God did it out of his infinite wisdom, that it's not because of you, because he knows that he has a life ahead for Gio, that he has purpose for him and his brother, and he has to he would want to keep him alive for him to fulfill purpose through them both. Yeah.
All right, so is that it?
Yes, to encourage somebody today, just know that God is able, and he'll deliver you out of what is, what seems to be an unending situation, because during that time with Gio, we thought that it would not be over. Every day
there was always something else.
There was something. Lord, if we give you all the details of that, time, it just, every day there was something else. We thought it was dengue at one point.
Yes, that's true. At one point, and I had to take the sample. I had to take this because the public health labs would take a long time. So I had to take the sample and run to a private facility to pay for them to test it to see if it was dengue. It wasn't dengue, but they just couldn't figure out what it was. And there was another point when we were wondering what was going to happen the Thursday coming, because like every Thursday there was something else. So one Thursday surgery, ill, admitted, one Thursday surgery, the next Thursday another surgery, the other Thursday they had to take him off something, on one antibiotic, something. It was just always something, but we trusted God throughout the process. Yes.
We did. And we learned something out of it as well, that sometimes when they complain of a tummy ache, and so giving them tea, it makes the appendix worse.
Oh yes.
But they say that most people just don't know that. So if you're watching this, at least you learned one thing. You even never heard anything else that was said, that giving somebody tea who complains of a tummy ache, if it is that the appendix has ruptured, or if it is that it's the appendix that's acting up, or that's going bad, the tea actually makes it worse. God bless you.
Yeah, blessings on you, everybody. God bless.